Hey there. Today I'm going to talk about two more core beliefs that sexual addicts have. So, in my last Facebook Live, I talked about the first two, which are that basically I am a bad and unworthy person. So, toxic shame is at the core of every sexual addict. The second one is no one would love me as I really am. And this is part of what keeps the sexual addict stuck wearing masks, hiding, lying. And oftentimes, I was just thinking about this today. Why is it that so many sexual addicts present as really religious or spiritual? And outside of their home, people are like, oh my gosh, he's such an amazing guy. Now, I'm using he, realizing people, of course, women can be sex addicts too. So, pardon my use of the he pronoun. But the reason why so many sexual addicts present as this incredible person is because they have to wear a mask of perfection to hide their internal feelings of shame, which is basically, I am an unworthy person, and their belief that no one would love them as they truly are. To go more in depth on these first two core beliefs, listen to my past video on the first two core beliefs of sexual addicts. Today I'm going to focus on the last two core beliefs of all sexual addicts, which are that basically my needs are never going to be met if I have to depend on other people. So I have to meet my own needs. And then finally, that sex is my most important need. So let's unpack those two. Starting with my needs are never going to be met if I have to depend upon others. Now, God created us for connection. He created us to need one another. We're ideally supposed to grow up in a family where we have nurturing, loving parents who are attentive to our needs. The majority of people with sexual addictions have some kind of trauma in their childhood. And for some, it is like a few traumatic events or a traumatic event. And for others, it's more the ongoing pervasive neglect of a childhood where their needs are not met. Now, I'm not telling you this to give the sex addict an excuse to act out. Certainly, we are responsible for our behaviors as adults. And I hate the fact that we have traumatic pain from our childhoods that we need to work on. But the addiction can, in a lot of ways, become a gift, because the pain that we're in from having a sexual addiction and wrestling with that eventually becomes greater than the pain of wrestling with and dealing with our past traumas. And sometimes the unwanted sexual behavior is what cracks open the door to really see, gosh, I had a whole childhood of neglect, or I had a whole childhood of traumas that I've never talked about and dealt with. So most sexual addicts are going to really benefit from going to therapy and one-on-one with a trained counselor, getting the help they need to heal the fact that they didn't get their needs met, and figuring out ways where they can get those needs met in legitimate ways. Now, with the sex addict's core belief that my needs are never going to be met if I have to depend on others, there is a way in which every sex addict is going to need to move into learning to depend on others for certain needs. And this is part of why having a recovery community is so key and so important, because you have to start to practice seeing other people show up for you. And you have to start to practice receiving some of your needs, having some of your needs met by other people who are safe. Part of the problem is that I think a lot of times when we're in an addiction, we try to make other people meet our needs in our time, in our way, with a demand instead of, and sometimes we're trying to get people to meet needs that is not their job to meet. So it can really help to work with a sponsor, a therapist, a coach, to figure out, okay, what are my needs and where am I just super self-reliant when I actually need to be interdependent in a healthy way with other people? Where am I saying, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and take care of myself because nobody else will, and we're turning our backs on God even while performing religious activities. So this is a tough one to break, but it is absolutely essential, because the healthiest and happiest of people are people who are in healthy, interdependent relationships with others. And if we're constantly living with a core belief that nobody else will meet our needs and that we cannot trust anyone, we cannot recover. We have to recover with connection and with community. Okay, now that last core belief of every sex addict is sex is my most important need. So here's what's tricky about this one is that that idea is even promoted in some well-meaning Christian literature out there. I remember in my first marriage early on reading a book that talked about sexual intimacy being a man's greatest need. And this was a very reputable source, a book. And I read that and immediately felt like, gosh, it's really going to be my responsibility to make sure that I'm actively available sexually. And what's interesting about that is that kind of belief system can really reinforce the sex addict's core belief that sex is their greatest need. Sex is no person's greatest need. Our greatest need is love and belonging. And people live an entire lifetime without sex and they don't die, and they can even thrive. So sex is more of a drive and an instinct, and there are moments where it may feel like a need, but what happens with this instinct when a person has a sexual addiction and they believe it's their most important need is what you feed grows and what you starve dies. So if you are constantly feeding into this belief that sex is my greatest need, then more and more over time that instinct is going to inflate. It's kind of like the person who thinks, like a food addict who thinks food and certain kinds of food, like high refined carbs and sugars foods are what my body needs. They start craving it. And then if you look at somebody who is extremely obese, they got that way over time, gradually, as their body got conditioned and their instinct for food got inflated until they were tolerating eating what a person of normal weight could not even fathom eating in one sitting. The same thing happens with the sexual addict. As they feed their sex addiction, as they are masturbating or looking at pornography or acting out with others, that reinforces that core belief and it increases that instinct. And so there are many people who benefit from doing a 90-day fast from all sexual activity. I would recommend you talk, if you're the sex addict, I would recommend that you talk to your therapist, your group members. Not everybody does this, but it is something that can help reset the brain's belief system and behavior chain of this idea that sex is your greatest need. And instead, look for what your real true needs are. Like sometimes somebody who's a sex addict is going to be acting out sexually when in fact what they really are feeling is lonely. And what they really need is connection with another person. Sometimes they might really just need a hug or non-sexual touch. But when the brain has been conditioned to believe sex is the greatest need, then when stress happens, when you feel sad or depressed, when you're feeling lonely, lots of different feelings can set this train into motion to leave the station and just go straight into acting out sexually. So anytime we have core beliefs that are rooted in partial truth, I mean, yes, sex is an instinct. It is a gift from God. It is something that we all think about. It's something that we all have a desire for at some point. There is this lie involved with that truth. And that is the enemy's fingerprints all over it, of his plan to steal, kill, and destroy, and to take the good things that God has given us, like relationships and love and belonging, and to twist them to steal, kill, and destroy from us. And so I would encourage you, if you're the one with the sex addiction, that you think through these 4 core beliefs and do some journaling on, what do I think about this? How am I feeling when I hear this belief? How does it resonate with me? And take it to your group and your therapist and ask for some feedback as you reflect on how you're feeling and what you're thinking about these core beliefs. And you may find others as you unpack these 4 core beliefs for every sex addict. You may find other core beliefs that you're like, oh my gosh, I just realized I'm believing this and it's a lie. So I hope that is helpful to you, and I wish you a great day.